Millionaire left his pregnant wife for his mistress. She returned with kids and ruined him. The air in Nathan Hale's penthouse office was worth more than most people's homes. Filtered, chilled, and scented with something subtle and expensive. Success, perhaps. He stared at the termination papers on his desk, the name on the signature line a ghost from a past he had meticulously buried. Mira Lane. 10 years ago, he had left her, pregnant and pleading, in the dust of his ambition. Now she was back, not as a ghost, but as the CEO of the company poised to execute a hostile takeover of his own, and Nathan was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a woman you once destroyed. Before we begin, take a moment and comment your city below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the world. Now, let's dive in. The city of San Francisco glittered below them, a carpet of diamonds laid out for their pleasure. From the 48th floor of the Lumina, the world felt distant, an abstract concept. Here, in the sterile perfection of their penthouse, reality was whatever Nathan Hale decreed it to be. Mira traced the condensation on her glass of water, the chill seeping into her fingertips. The evening was meant to be a celebration. Nathan's company, Hale Innovations, had just secured a Series C funding round that catapulted its valuation into the stratosphere. He was no longer just a tech wunderkind. He was a king. And this apartment was his castle in the clouds. To us, Nathan said, raising his champagne flute. The crystal chimed, a perfect clear note in the quiet room. He was beautiful, in the way a marble statue is beautiful, flawlessly sculpted, commanding, and cold. His dark hair was artfully disheveled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a glint of perpetual victory. To us, Mira echoed, her voice a little too soft. She didn't lift her glass. The champagne, once a symbol of their shared dreams, now tasted like ash in her mouth. For weeks, a quiet dread had been coiling in her stomach, a serpent of intuition she could no longer ignore. It was in the small things. The way Nathan's phone was now permanently attached to his hand, angled away from her. The late nights at the office that stretched into the pre-dawn hours, his excuses becoming increasingly flimsy. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his custom-tailored suits, a faint floral note that spoke of secrets. "You're quiet tonight," Nathan observed, his gaze analytical, not concerned. He was a man who solved problems, and right now, she was a problem. "Is it the funding? I told you, Mira, this changes everything. We're untouchable." We. The word felt like a lie. He meant he was untouchable. She was just a feature of his life, the elegant, supportive wife who looked good on his arm at galas and managed the silent, seamless running of their home. She had been his first investor, not with money, but with her unwavering belief and the small inheritance her parents had left her, which had been just enough to get his prototype off the ground. She had brainstormed company names with him on their tiny apartment floor, coded alongside him in the early days, and sacrificed her own career in graphic design to become the unpaid, uncredited backbone of his ascent. "I'm happy for you, Nathan, truly," she said. And she was. But the happiness was tangled with a profound and growing sorrow. "It's just, I have something to tell you." This was it. The moment she'd been rehearsing in her head for days. She took a breath, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, where a secret of her own was blooming. "I'm pregnant?" The words hung in the air between them, fragile as spun glass. She watched his face, searching for the man she had fallen in love with. The passionate, brilliant dreamer who had once told her she was his entire world. But that man was gone. The face that looked back at her was a mask of controlled annoyance. The joy, the shock, the love she had prayed for. None of it was there. His jaw tightened, and a muscle feathered along his cheek. "Pregnant?" he repeated, the word tasting like a foreign object in his mouth. How? I thought we were careful. The clinical nature of the question struck her like a slap. Careful doesn't always mean perfect, Nathan. It happened. We're having a baby. He set his champagne flute down with a sharp click. He began to pace, his movements agitated, a predator confined in his own gilded cage. This is inconvenient, Mira. The timing is terrible. We're on the verge of a global launch. I need to be focused. A baby. He trailed off, shaking his head as if warding off a nightmare. The serpent of dread in her stomach uncoiled and struck, its venom flooding her veins. Inconvenient? She whispered, the word cracking. A baby is inconvenient. Nathan, this is our child. He finally stopped pacing and turned to her, his eyes devoid of warmth. There is no our child, he said, his voice flat and brutal. There is my company, my life, and this complication. And then he delivered the final killing blow. I've been seeing someone, he said, without a flicker of remorse. Her name is Dahlia. I'm in love with her. I was going to tell you, but this changes the timeline. Mira felt the floor drop out from under her. The glittering city outside the window blurred into a meaningless smear of light. Dahlia. She knew the name. Dahlia Reed. The fiercely ambitious, raven-haired VP of marketing he'd hired 6 months ago. The woman whose floral perfume now made sense. You're leaving me? The question was a raw, broken thing. I am, he confirmed. Dahlia understands my world. She's part of it. She doesn't ask for things I can't give. The implication was clear. Mira, with her inconvenient pregnancy and her outdated notions of love and family, was asking for too much. She was a relic from his past, an anchor holding him back from the future he wanted, a future that did not include her or their unborn child. So that's it, she said, a strange, hollow calm settling over her. It was the calm of utter devastation, the quiet after the bomb has already fallen. Years of my life, my support, our child. You just throw it all away for her? Don't be dramatic, Mira, he sighed, running a hand through his perfect hair. I'll be generous. I'll give you a settlement that will ensure you and the baby are comfortable. You won't have to worry about money. Just sign the papers, be discreet, and we can both move on. He was talking about their life, their marriage, their child, as if it were a business transaction, an asset to be liquidated. She looked at this man, this stranger in her husband's skin, and saw him for what he truly was, a man so blinded by his own ambition that his heart had turned to stone. She stood up, her legs shaking but holding. Her hand fell away from her stomach, and a new, steely resolve began to form in the ruins of her heart. He wanted her to be discreet. He wanted her to disappear. He wanted to erase her and his child from his perfect, curated life. No, she said, her voice quiet but ringing with a strength she didn't know she possessed. Nathan's brow furrowed. No? What do you mean, no? I'm offering you a fortune. I don't want your money, she said, looking him straight in the eye. I don't want your settlement, and I won't be discreet. She walked past him, towards the bedroom that no longer felt like hers. You want to erase us, Nathan? Fine. But one day, you'll look back on this moment. You'll look back and realize you didn't just lose a wife. You lost your entire world. You just don't know it yet. She packed a single bag, her movements mechanical. She took her passport, the last of her own savings, and the ultrasound picture she had been so excited to show him, now a painful talisman of her betrayal. As she walked to the door, she didn't look back. The sound of it closing behind her was not an end, but a beginning. The beginning of a long, cold, and lonely road. But it was her road now, and she would walk it alone. The first year was a blur of exhaustion and grief. Mira moved to Portland, Oregon, a city chosen for its anonymity and its distance from the life she'd lost. She found a small second-floor apartment in a building that smelled of damp earth and old wood, a world away from the sterile scent of success in Nathan's penthouse. The generous settlement Nathan had offered was a poisoned chalice she refused to drink from. His lawyers sent papers, sleek and menacing, to her parents' old address, which were then forwarded to her. She threw them away without reading them. Taking his money would have felt like an admission that she and her child were a problem that could be paid off, a loose end to be tied up. Her pride, raw and wounded as it was all she had left. She gave birth to twins, a boy, Orion, with his father's stormy eyes and a quiet, watchful nature, and a girl, Lyra, with Mira's dark hair and a fierce, determined cry. They were beautiful and perfect and utterly terrifying. She held them in the stark, fluorescent light of the hospital room, her heart aching with a love so fierce it felt like a physical wound. They were hers alone, a blessing and a burden all in one. Her days became a monotonous cycle of feeding, changing, and rocking. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her graphic design skills, once sharp and sought after, grew dull from disuse. She took on freelance work, designing cheap logos for local businesses and formatting newsletters for pennies, often working with a baby strapped to her chest and the other sleeping fitfully in a bassinet by her desk. There were moments of despair so profound she thought they might swallow her whole. Moments when she'd stand by the window, watching the rain lash against the glass, the weight of her solitude pressing down on her. She saw the news of Nathan and Dahlia online. They were the tech world's golden couple, gracing magazine covers, their smiles polished, their success a glittering spectacle. One article described their child-free by choice lifestyle, a conscious decision to focus on their careers and their impact on the world. The words were a knife in her heart. He hadn't just rejected her, he had rejected the very idea of their children. But then, Orion would wrap his tiny hand around her finger, his gaze serious and trusting. Or Lyra would let out a gurgle of laughter, a sound so pure it could momentarily chase away the darkest shadows. And in those moments, Mira found her strength. Her anger, once a wild, consuming fire, began to cool and harden into something else. Resolve. She was not a victim. She was a mother. And she would not let her children's lives be defined by the man who had abandoned them. She started small. She used her sleepless nights not to grieve, but to learn. She devoured online courses in user experience, UX, and user interface, UI, design, fields that were exploding in the tech world. It was a world she knew, a world she had helped Nathan navigate. But this time, she was building something for herself. She created a portfolio, working on spec projects, redesigning existing apps, and showcasing a talent that was not just about aesthetics, but about intuitive, human-centered design. Her work had a depth and empathy that was often missing in the cold, metric-driven world of tech. She understood how people felt, because she had felt everything. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to get noticed. A small startup in Portland hired her for a contract, then another. Her reputation grew through word of mouth. She was reliable, brilliant, and her designs worked. They didn't just look good, they improved user engagement and retention. 2 years after she left San Francisco, she founded her own small consultancy, Lane Design. She operated it from her living room, juggling client calls with nap times and school runs. It was a grueling, relentless existence, but it was hers. Every success, no matter how small, was a brick she laid in the foundation of her new life. She never spoke of Nathan. To her new friends and colleagues, she was a single mother, a widow to a past she didn't discuss. The twins knew nothing of their father. How could she explain a man who had chosen a balance sheet over his own flesh and blood? One evening, while the twins were asleep, she found herself on a financial news website. A headline caught her eye: Hale Innovation Stumbles. User backlash over unintuitive redesign. Curiosity, cold and sharp, compelled her to click. The article detailed how Nathan's company, after firing its original design team in a cost-cutting measure, had rolled out a new interface for its flagship product. It was a disaster. Users were fleeing in droves. The stock was plummeting. The article quoted an anonymous former employee. "Nathan Hale thinks he knows everything. He pushed this through against everyone's advice. He surrounded himself with yes men. Since Dahlia Reed took over strategy, it's all about image, not substance." Mira stared at the screen, a slow, cold smile touching her lips for the first time in years. He was arrogant. He was failing. And his weakness, she realized, was her strength. He had forgotten the most important rule, the one she had whispered to him in the early days. It's all about the user. An idea began to form in her mind, audacious and terrifying. It was a long shot, a gamble that could cost her everything she had worked so hard to build. But the image of her children sleeping peacefully in the next room solidified her resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. It was about showing Nathan Hale and the world what he had thrown away. She opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She began to draft a proposal, a plan to build a rival platform from the ground up. One that was better, smarter, and more human than anything Hale Innovations could ever produce. She would not just build a company. She would build an empire on the ashes of the man who had tried to burn her down. The next 8 years were a testament to the power of focused rage and maternal love. Mira's consultancy, Lane Design, evolved. It was no longer just her in a living room. It was a small, dedicated team in a modest office in Portland's Pearl District. But her ambition had outgrown the city's gentle rhythm. The tech world's center of gravity was, and always had been, Silicon Valley. To truly challenge Nathan, she had to return to the belly of the beast. She didn't go back to San Francisco. Not yet. Instead, she chose Austin, Texas, the burgeoning, scrappy rival to the Bay Area's established dominance. It was a place for innovators, for people with something to prove. It was perfect. She rebranded. Lane Design became Aura, a name that spoke to the intuitive, almost living quality of her software. Her mission was simple: to create technology that felt less like a tool and more like a partner. While Hale Innovations was focused on enterprise solutions, cold, corporate, and complex, Aura focused on the creative class: artists, writers, independent business owners, people like her. Orion and Lyra were 10 years old now, bright, inquisitive children who were the center of her universe. Orion had his father's analytical mind, a quiet intensity that saw him excel in math and coding clubs. Lyra was a firecracker, a natural leader with her mother's artistic flair and a sharp, witty tongue. They were a team, the three of them against the world. They knew their father was a sore subject. They knew he wasn't in their lives, and they had, with the simple, heartbreaking acceptance of children, stopped asking why. Mira's silence on the matter was a wall they learned not to push against. Her love was so complete, so all-encompassing, that it had, for the most part, filled the space a father should have occupied. Aura's flagship product was a project management and design suite called Canvas. It was everything Croft's software was not: beautiful, intuitive, and collaborative. It anticipated the user's needs. It made work feel less like a chore and more like an act of creation. It went viral in the design and startup communities. Mira was no longer just a founder. She was a visionary. She gave talks at tech conferences, her story carefully curated. She was a single mother who had built a company from scratch, a narrative of empowerment and resilience. She never mentioned Nathan, but those in the know, the old guard of Silicon Valley, began to connect the dots. The whispers grew louder. That's Nathan Hale's ex-wife, the one he left. Meanwhile, Nathan's world was beginning to fray at the edges. His marriage to Dahlia was less a partnership and more a merger of ambitions. Their life was a performance for the benefit of Forbes and Fortune magazine. Their penthouse was a showroom. Their conversations were strategy meetings, and their affection was a transaction. They were powerful, wealthy, and deeply, profoundly lonely. Hale Innovations was a giant, but it was a clumsy one. It was losing ground to nimbler, more innovative companies like Aura. Nathan watched Aura's rise with a mixture of disbelief and a deep, unsettling sense of familiarity. He saw Mira's design philosophy, her soul, embedded in every line of its code. He saw the ghost of their shared dreams, repurposed and turned into a weapon against him. He dismissed it as a fluke, a niche product for artists and hipsters. He was the titan, she was an annoyance. But then, Aura began to encroach on his territory. They launched Aura Enterprise, a version of Canvas tailored for large corporations. It was a direct assault, and it was working. One of Nathan's key clients, a massive media conglomerate, dropped Hale Innovations and signed a multi-million-dollar contract with Aura. The news hit Nathan like a physical blow. He was in his office, the same office where he had celebrated his victory 10 years prior, when his COO delivered the news. "They said our platform was clunky and outdated," the COO said, avoiding Nathan's gaze. "They said Aura felt human." Human. The word mocked him. He looked out at the city, but the view no longer brought him any pleasure. It felt like a kingdom that was slowly slipping through his fingers. He pulled up Aura's website on his monitor. On the About Us page, there was a picture of Mira. She was different. The soft, trusting woman he had discarded was gone. In her place was a woman of formidable presence. Her hair was cut in a sharp, stylish bob. Her eyes, once filled with adoration for him, now held a cool, unwavering confidence. She was not just surviving, she was thriving. And she was coming for him. For the first time in a decade, Nathan Hale felt a sliver of fear. The final move was a masterpiece of strategic cruelty. A major tech holding company, a behemoth called Nexus Capital, had been quietly acquiring a significant stake in Hale Innovations. Nathan's company, weakened by declining profits and a tarnished brand, was vulnerable. Nexus saw an opportunity for a buyout, a chance to absorb Croft's client list and infrastructure. The CEO of Nexus Capital, a shrewd and calculating man named Marcus Thorne, requested a meeting with Nathan. The future of his company was on the line. Nathan and Dahlia prepped for days, their conversations tense and brittle. "This is your fault!" Dahlia had hissed the night before the meeting, her voice sharp with panic. "You got complacent. You underestimated her." "We got complacent," Nathan shot back. "You were the one who pushed for the redesign. You were the one who cared more about the brand's image than its function." Their accusations were a frantic attempt to assign blame, to distance themselves from the failure that was now lapping at their feet. The gilded cage had become a real one, and they were rattling its bars. The meeting was held in the Nexus Capital boardroom, a cavernous space on the top floor of a skyscraper that made Nathan's own office feel provincial. Nathan, Dahlia, and their legal team sat on one side of a massive mahogany table. Marcus Thorne sat opposite them, flanked by his advisors. "Nathan, thank you for coming," Marcus began, his voice smooth as silk. "We at Nexus have a great deal of respect for what you've built. However, the market is shifting. Hale Innovations, in its current state, is struggling to adapt. We believe that with new leadership and a new strategic direction, it can be revitalized." It was the preamble to an execution. Nathan's hands clenched into fists under the table. "We are prepared to make a generous offer to acquire a controlling interest in the company," Marcus continued. "But our board feels a change in vision is paramount. To that end, we've decided to partner with a proven innovator in the space, someone whose vision for the future of tech aligns with ours, someone who will take over as CEO post-acquisition." A door at the side of the boardroom opened, and Mira Lane walked in. She moved with a quiet confidence that filled the room. She was wearing a tailored navy blue dress, the picture of understated power. She wasn't smiling. Her expression was neutral, professional, and utterly devastating. She took the empty seat beside Marcus Thorne, directly opposite Nathan. The air crackled with unspoken history. Dahlia let out a small, strangled gasp, her mask of composure shattering. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face. It was a checkmate he had never seen coming. Nexus wasn't just buying his company, they were giving it to her. "Mira," he breathed, the name tasting like poison and regret. "Nathan," she acknowledged, her voice even and cool. She didn't look at Dahlia. In her eyes, Dahlia didn't even exist. Marcus was just explaining the new strategic direction. The rest of the meeting was a surreal nightmare. Mira, with the backing of Nexus, laid out her plan. She spoke of integrating Aura's design philosophy, of rebuilding the platform from the ground up, of focusing on user-centric innovation. She was dismantling his legacy, piece by piece, and using his own company's resources to do it. She never once made it personal, which was, of course, the most personal attack of all. Her cold professionalism was a testament to how completely she had excised him from her heart. He was being ruined, not with shouting and tears, but with corporate synergy and a strategic buyout. When it was over, Nathan was a king without a kingdom. He would be given a title, a meaningless transitional role, and a payout that felt like severance for his own life. He was a figurehead, a ghost who would haunt the halls of the company he had built until he was no longer needed. As they filed out of the room, Mira paused. She turned to Nathan, her eyes finally meeting his. For a fleeting second, he saw a flicker of the woman he once knew, a hint of shared history in their depths. "I'm moving back to San Francisco," she said, her voice softer now, for his ears only. "My children. They'll be starting school here in the fall. It's time they were closer to their family." The word hung in the air. Children, plural. The strategic ruin of his company was nothing compared to the personal devastation of that single word. He had known, intellectually, that she'd had the baby. A baby. One. But in his careful, deliberate ignorance, he had never let himself picture it, never let himself wonder. "Children?" he echoed, his voice hoarse. "Yes," she said. "A boy and a girl. Orion and Lyra. They're 10 years old." She held his gaze, letting the weight of those lost years settle upon him. "They look a lot like you, Nathan. I thought you should know." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway, a ruined man who had just discovered the true price of his ambition. He had not just lost his company. He had lost a decade. He had lost a son and a daughter. And he had a horrifying, sinking feeling that the reckoning was only just beginning. The aftermath was a silent demolition. Nathan Hale, the titan of tech, became a ghost in his own machine. His new title, Chief Innovation Strategist, was a cruel joke. He had an office, but no power. He was invited to meetings, but his opinions were politely ignored. He was a relic on display, a cautionary tale whispered in the hallways of the company that now bore Mira's quiet, decisive stamp. He watched her work, and it was a special kind of torture. She managed with a calm authority he had never possessed. Where he had ruled with fear and ego, she led with respect and collaboration. His old employees, the ones who had cowered before him, now brought their ideas to her with an eager confidence. They were loyal to her. She had built a better world on the foundations of his. His relationship with Dahlia crumbled into dust. The shared ambition that had been their only bond now curdled into bitter recrimination. "You let this happen!" she shrieked at him one night in the cavernous, empty penthouse. The city lights outside no longer looked like jewels, but like the cold, indifferent eyes of a world that had moved on without them. "You were so obsessed with your own legend you didn't even see her coming." "And where were you, Dahlia?" he retorted, his voice hollow. You were the VP of Strategy. Your strategy was to approve a redesign that alienated our entire user base. This is as much your failure as it is mine. I'm leaving, Nathan, she announced, her voice flat. There was no sadness, only the cold calculation of a businesswoman cutting her losses. My lawyers will be in touch with yours. I'm not going down with this ship. He didn't have the energy to argue. He just nodded. When she walked out of the door, it made less noise than when Mira had left 10 years ago, but it felt infinitely more final. He was utterly, completely alone. But it wasn't the loss of his company or his wife that haunted his sleepless nights. It was one word, spoken in Mira's calm, devastating voice. Children. Orion and Lyra. The names echoed in the silence of his multi-million-dollar apartment. He started digging, using the last vestiges of his resources to do what he should have done a decade ago. He hired a private investigator, a discreet man who brought him a thin file folder that felt heavier than a tombstone. Inside were photographs, a boy with his own stormy eyes and serious mouth, bent over a chessboard in a park, his focus absolute. A girl with Mira's dark, flowing hair and a mischievous grin, mid-laugh on a swing set, her face tilted towards the sun. School pictures. Photos from a birthday party with a small group of friends. He spread them out on his glass coffee table, and for the first time since Mira had left, Nathan Hale wept. These were not abstract concepts. They were not a complication. They were real. They had lived 10 years of life without him. They had scraped their knees, lost their first teeth, learned to read, and made friends, all while he was chasing valuations and celebrating his own sterile success. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. It was a grief for a life he had never known, for a version of himself that had died the day he chose ambition over love. An obsession took root. He had to see them. Not as photographs, but as living, breathing beings. He found out their school, a private academy nestled in Pacific Heights. He learned their schedule. He started parking his car a block away, watching from behind tinted windows as Mira's sensible hybrid pulled up to the curb. He watched her get out, her face softening as she saw them. He watched Orion, who always carried a book, and Lyra, who always seemed to be telling an animated story. He saw the easy affection between them, the casual way Lyra would loop her arm through her mother's, the quiet nod Orion would give Mira, a silent communication that spoke of years of shared understanding. They were a perfect, self-contained unit. A fortress. And he was the enemy at the gates. One afternoon he couldn't stand it anymore. He knew they went to a nearby park after school on Fridays. He went there, sitting on a bench, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt like a spy in his own life. And then he saw them. Mira was on a bench talking on her phone, her back to the playground. Orion was sitting under a tree, reading. Lyra was trying to get a kite to fly, her face a mask of frustration. His feet moved before his brain could stop them. He walked towards her, his mouth dry. "You need to give it more slack, then run against the wind," he said, his voice raspy. Lyra turned, startled. She looked at him with Mira's intelligent, curious eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm a friend of your mom's." He lied, the words feeling like acid on his tongue. "From a long time ago. Here, let me show you." His hands trembled as he took the kite. He adjusted the string, felt the direction of the breeze, and in that moment, all his business acumen, all his strategic genius, felt like worthless dust. This was real. He showed her how to hold it, how to run. The kite caught a gust and soared into the air, a bright splash of red against the blue sky. Lyra's face lit up with a joy so pure it was like a physical blow. "Wow! Thank you, mister!" From under the tree, Orion was watching them, his expression unreadable, his stormy eyes narrowed with a suspicion that was all too familiar. It was like looking at a miniature version of himself. "Lyra, who is that?" Orion called out, his voice carrying a note of caution. Before Nathan could answer, another voice cut through the air, sharp and cold as ice. Get away from my children." Mira was standing there, her phone gone, her body rigid with fury. Her face was pale, but her eyes were blazing, the protective rage of a mother lioness. Lyra immediately ran to her side. Orion stood up, placing himself slightly in front of his sister. Nathan's heart fractured. They were protecting their mother from him. "Mira, he started, his voice pleading. "You don't get to do this," she hissed, her voice low and trembling with rage. "You don't get to play the friendly stranger in the park. You lost that right 10 years ago. You don't exist in their world. I will not have you haunting them like some ghost, poisoning the life I have bled to build for them. Stay away from us, Nathan. I mean it. If I see you near them again, I will get a restraining order." She took each of her children by the hand, turned her back on him, and walked away without a second glance. Nathan stood alone in the park, the red kite now a distant speck in the sky. He had just had his first conversation with his daughter, been seen by his son, and been utterly rejected by all three. The ruin was no longer strategic or financial. It was absolute. It was the complete and total annihilation of his soul. The park incident was a catalyst. For Mira, it was a violation of the sanctuary she had so carefully constructed. That night, after she put the twins to bed, she sat in the dark of her new, beautiful home, a home she had bought with her own money, and confronted the tangled mess of her own heart. Her anger was pure and justified, but beneath it, there was a tremor of something else. Seeing Nathan, looking so broken and lost, had stirred a ghost within her. Not a ghost of love, that was long dead and buried. It was a ghost of pity, and she hated it. She hated that after everything, a part of her could still see the broken man inside the monster. More importantly, she had to face a truth she had been avoiding. Her children were getting older. Orion, with his sharp, analytical mind, was already asking questions she found harder and harder to deflect. Lyra's easy curiosity would soon turn to pointed inquiry. She couldn't protect them from the truth forever. Hiding their father from them was, in its own way, a form of control. Was she protecting them? Or was she just protecting herself from more pain? For Nathan, the confrontation was the rock bottom he so desperately needed to hit. Mira's threat, her raw fury, stripped away the last of his delusions. He couldn't charm his way into this. He couldn't buy it. He couldn't strategize it. He did the one thing he had never done in his life. He surrendered. He went home to his empty penthouse and wrote Mira an email. There was no strategy, no carefully crafted prose. It was just the raw, unvarnished truth, typed out with trembling fingers. Subject: I am sorry. Mira, you are right. About all of it. What I did to you, to them, is unforgivable. There is no excuse, and I will not offer one. I was a coward, a fool, a man so hollow I thought a company could fill the space where my heart should have been. Seeing them, seeing you, I understand now what I threw away. It wasn't just a family. It was my humanity. I will respect your wishes. I will stay away. I will not be a ghost in your lives. I will sign any paper, agree to any condition, to ensure you and the children have peace. My only request, and I know I have no right to ask it, is that one day you will tell them the truth. Not for my sake, for theirs. They deserve to know their story, even the ugly parts. And if they ever, for any reason, want to know the man who failed them so completely, I will be waiting. I am not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I am just asking that you believe one thing. I am sorry for everything. Nathan. He hit send before he could lose his nerve. And then he waited. He expected no reply. A week passed. It was the longest week of his life. He went to the office and tendered his official resignation, effective immediately. He couldn't stand being a ghost anymore. He started the process of selling the penthouse. The gilded cage had become unbearable. Then an email appeared in his inbox. It was from Mira. Subject: Re. I am sorry. Nathan? I believe you. Your apology is 10 years too late, but I believe it. This is not for you. This is for Orion and Lyra. They are starting to ask questions. They deserve answers. And I have decided that my anger, however justified, should not be the gatekeeper to their history. I am willing to facilitate a meeting, not a casual encounter in a park, a structured, mediated introduction. I will hire a family therapist to guide the process. It will be on my terms, at a time and place of my choosing. You will be honest. You will not make promises you can't keep. You will answer their questions, and you will accept their reactions, whatever they may be. Their well-being is my only priority. This is not forgiveness, Nathan. And it is not a reconciliation. It is a chance for you to do the one thing you have never done. Show up. Don't waste it. Mira. The first meeting took place in the neutral, beige office of a child psychologist. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Nathan sat on one side of the room, feeling more terrified than he had in any boardroom. Mira sat with the twins on the other side, her posture protective, her presence a silent, powerful anchor for them. Orion stared at Nathan with those unnervingly familiar eyes, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stoic judgment. Lyra fidgeted, glancing from Nathan to her mother, her curiosity warring with her confusion. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, guided the conversation gently. Orion, Lyra, she began. This is Nathan. He is your biological father. Lyra gasped. Orion just continued to stare, his expression unchanging. Why did you leave? Orion asked, his voice flat. It was the first thing he said, a question like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Nathan's prepared words, his carefully rehearsed explanations, evaporated. He looked at this serious 10-year-old boy who was his son, and he gave him the only thing he had left. The truth. Because I was a coward, Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. I was young and selfish, and I was scared. I was building my company, and I foolishly thought it was the most important thing in the world. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. There is no good reason, Orion. There's just a bad one. I was wrong. And I have regretted it every single day for the last 10 years. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Mom said you didn't want us. That's not true, Nathan said, his own eyes welling up. He looked at Mira, a silent apology passing between them. I didn't know you. I couldn't picture you. And in my fear and my selfishness, I pushed you away. It is the single greatest regret of my life. You are the most important things in the world, and I was too much of a fool to see it. The conversation was stilted, painful. They talked for an hour. Nathan answered their questions honestly. He didn't spare himself. He told them about his ambition, about Dahlia, about the empty life he had built. He painted a portrait of a flawed, broken man, and he did not ask for their sympathy. At the end of the session, as they were leaving, Lyra paused at the door. She turned back to him. The kite was cool, she said quietly. And in those 4 words, Nathan Hale felt the first, tiny, fragile seed of redemption being planted in the barren soil of his ruined life. The meetings continued, weekly at first, then bi-weekly. It was a slow, arduous process. Orion tested him, asking difficult questions, remaining distant and watchful. Lyra was more forgiving, her heart more open, but she was fiercely loyal to her mother, and her trust was conditional. Nathan's redemption was not a dramatic, cinematic event. It was a quiet, painstaking process of earning his place. It was showing up, every single time. It was listening more than he talked. It was learning that Orion loved chess and was a brilliant coder, and that Lyra wrote incredible stories and painted beautiful, vibrant pictures. It was remembering their birthdays. It was cheering for Lyra at her soccer game from the back of the bleachers and helping Orion debug a line of code over a video call. He never got his company back. He never got Mira back. Their love story was over, a tragedy they both had to live with. But in its place, something new and fragile began to grow. A different kind of family, one built not on romantic love, but on a shared, painful history and a tentative hope for the future. One Saturday afternoon, months later, Nathan was sitting with Orion in the park, a chessboard between them. Mira and Lyra were a short distance away, sketching in a notebook. It was a comfortable, peaceful silence. "Checkmate," Orion said quietly, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile on his face. Nathan looked at the board, then at his son. He had been so focused on Orion's king, he hadn't seen the trap. The boy was brilliant. "You got me," Nathan said, a genuine laugh escaping him for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "Good game, son." Orion nodded, and in his stormy eyes, Nathan saw not suspicion, but a flicker of acceptance. Of peace. Nathan looked over at Mira. She was watching them, and for the first time, the wariness in her expression was softened by something else. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. It was something quieter, more profound. It was the simple, complex acknowledgement of a circle, finally, painfully, being closed. He had been ruined. His empire of glass and steel had been shattered. But here, in a sun-drenched park, with the sun he almost never knew, Nathan Hale finally understood what it meant to be rich. The story of Nathan and Mira is a raw and powerful reminder that our choices create ripples we can't always see. Nathan's ambition cost him a decade with his children, and his ruin wasn't just financial. It was the complete collapse of the world he valued. Mira's journey from betrayal to building her own empire shows the incredible strength found in resilience and a mother's love. It's a story about consequences, the slow, painful path to redemption, and the fact that a true legacy isn't built in a boardroom, but in the hearts of the people you love. If this story of heartbreak, revenge, and ultimate redemption moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who appreciates a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe for more content that explores the deep complexities of the human heart. Thank you for watching.